I'd like to welcome all y'all here tonight. The Hinds County Republican Party is happy to have you. Meeting here from our Republican candidates for Ward 1 of the City Council. For those of you that aren't familiar with me, I am Pete Perry. For one more year, I am Chairman of the Hinds County Republican Party. And by default, I ended up being the moderator here tonight. But under this format that we're going to use, we're going to introduce in this debate, you're not going to hear very much from me. You'll only see me in the role of presenting questions. Other than that, the moderation for this debate, really going to go on this discussion, don't going to be left to the candidates. Let me introduce these candidates to you. I know most of y'all already know them, but in the order that we're going to start addressing the question, we have this order, by the way, was determined by a random draw of playing cards. But we have Bill Wilson, Richard Sellers, Charles Barber, and Ashley Foote. As y'all know, under the conditions of the special election that's being followed by the city, all the candidates will run together on the same ballot, but they can acknowledge and be identified by party. These are the four candidates that are qualified for this position that identify themselves as Republicans, and thus their inclusion in this debate tonight. In a few minutes, I'm going to explain the format of tonight's debate, because it's going to be a little different from what we've had before. Prior to that, I'd like to introduce a few folks here that have been very helpful in putting this together. First, we'd like to express our appreciation to Bellwether Church. They've been very cooperative. They're an integral part of this Ward 1 community. They've been here. They've tried to get involved in activities of the community. Jeremy Wolf back here, who's running our microphone panel tonight, has been our major contact. John Hugh Tate, who's the preacher here, has been a good supporter of all kinds of events in Northeast Jackson and the city at large. And we want to thank y'all for hosting us. Thank you. Kirby Butler, who's on our Hinds County Committee, has been extremely helpful in trying to get all our technical stuff, which I'll explain to you here in a minute, and his able assistant back here in the back of the computer in the back corner, Natalie Toad, who's back there. And Natalie, I'm not sure I know who that was with you that came in. Your sister, okay. And we're glad to have y'all. They want to help keep up with the time as we go through this process. Before we get started any further, I would like to ask a longtime Republican here in Jackson, Jeannie Wheeler, if she would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and we're going to follow that with my friend, Representative Sally Doty. Sally Doty, come up here and give us an invitation.
I would remind you before we do this that the proper way to say this is one nation under God together, not one nation under God separate. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You bow your heads with me, please. Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity that we have tonight to come together and to hear these candidates. Lord, this week of Thanksgiving, it's so important that we give you thanks for the many blessings that we have, our families, our communities, and just so many things that you've blessed us with. Lord, we pray especially for these candidates and their families as they have all began this journey towards public service. It's a difficult journey, and we pray that you will give them a special blessing and help their endurance as we go through the last days of this race. We ask that you bless our state and our country and our leaders to make good decisions on behalf of all of our citizens. We ask all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Sally. I apologize for almost promoting you to the house. Just slip. First, let me go through a couple of ground rules if I can. Each of the candidates have been given information about the format we're going to have and the rules that we are all asking. And we would like to also ask while we're dealing with you that everybody here respect our candidates and their campaign. It's our intent to have a very civil, informative discussion among and between the four candidates. We don't want any participation by any of the audience. No clapping, no cheering, no other activity by anyone until after we finish. At that time, I hope you'll all be so overwhelmed by the quality of their responses in this performance here that you'll give them a hearty round of applause for all of them then. I'd like everybody to silence their cell phone. I'm going to have to do that to mine in just a second. So that we're not having distractions. So take your cell phone, cut them off. Should you need to excuse yourself for any reason during the debate, I'd like to ask that you try to do it between the questions rather than while the candidates are talking. All the time limits for the candidates are going to be strictly followed. Once the time limit has been reached, the candidates will stop talking. If they don't, they might as well go off anyway, so they might as well stop talking. So we're going to cut off the time when the time limit's there. Here's the format. Each candidate has been allotted 20 minutes of time to be used in addressing all the questions that are asked. As part of that 20 minutes, a candidate can make an opening statement which cannot exceed 3 minutes. We'll have 2 rounds of questions, each round to include 4 questions. The selection of which question is first posed and what candidate gets it is going to come by drawing them out of this vote. So we don't know what candidate is going to start with the question. The candidate to whom the first question is asked will be allowed to speak to it for up to 3 minutes. On the back, you'll see the clock. The top clock shows a 3-minute clock, shows how much time is left, how much time is used. The bottom clock is the 20-minute clock. It'll show you for that same candidate how much of their total 20 minutes to use. They've got the same screen in front of them. On the first question is going to go to Bill. He's got to answer it. He can spend up to 3 minutes. Anybody else that wants to address that question can for however much time they want to, up to 3 minutes. If Richard wants to address it but only spends 2 minutes and somebody else says something, he comes back, he's still got a minute he can use later. We can have discourse between the candidates this way, but they've got a total of 3 minutes for this question. Following that, everybody's through with addressing what they want to speak to, we'll go to the next question. We'll start with Richard and move in whatever order they indicate they want to speak. If they don't want to speak to a question, they don't have to. It's up to them to use up their 20 minutes how they want to. Obviously, with 8 questions, they can't spend 3 minutes on each one because there's not that much time. So they're going to have to manage their time on the issues they think are important. Once the candidate exhausted his entire 20 minutes, he can't speak anymore. Now, if he ain't got his second question, we're going to reserve 2.5 minutes that he can't use up because he'll have to be able to address the second question. At the end of the whole night, we're going to allow 2 minutes for each of them to have a closing statement. That's not part of this 20 minutes. That's the format. We're going to see how it works. Before we start, I have a good friend of mine just walked in, who I heard was going to grace us tonight if he could, on his way to Clarksdale. Chairman Nassif of the Chairman of the State Republican Party, who's also, by the way, a resident of Ward 1, I believe.
Thank you. Thank y'all. Really, you just could have the debate on the debate format. And that would be, just see whoever could figure that out. Look, I just want to say this, and I've said this before publicly, and it's nice to see so many good friends out there that helped us through this year. Never thought we'd be at the end of the year stronger than we began it. We've got, by the way, I need to plug our event on December 8th with Rand Hall at the Old Castle Inn. It's going to be a very popular thing, and I hope y'all will come. Let me just say this is, I would be at this debate or forum even if I were not a resident of this ward because of how important it is. And I'm glad to see y'all here. I'm glad to see the 4 people up on the stage that are here tonight. Bipartisan or nonpartisan or not, we've got to get a Republican in this city. And that's the bottom line. And that's what I'm going to try to do everything in my power to do, because I think that gives us the most chance of the people that live in Ward 1 to be represented in the way we want to be represented. So I want to thank y'all for being here. Thank Pete for everything this year, not just tonight, making sure that we had the candidates and gave them the ability to have this forum and the stage because they deserve it. It's that important of a position. I remember I thought about running for city council one time and somebody gave me advice and they said the closest you were to your constituents, the worse the office was. That was a little bit of cynical advice, but it comes from somebody all y'all know, which I can't disclose. But anyway, thank y'all for being here. Thank you for giving me just a second to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, first question. If I can get this up. What? Emil. If you are elected, your term would last until the summer of 2017, 2.5 years. What do you hope you could look back on at the end of your term as your accomplishments? How would you hope that your term on council will be viewed by the citizens of Ward 1?
First thing I want to do is actually the first piece of legislation that I would propose, and that's our GI bill for police that we've been talking about. It's a budget-neutral proposal that takes our recidivism rate, our drop-off rate of police, and cuts it down. Because we train these officers, we go to the expense of training them. If they stay a month or two, then the city they leave has to pay us back. But if they stay 6 months, a year, the city they leave to doesn't have to pay us back. Well, we ran the numbers. It's cheaper, actually, for us to pay off the student loans, just like a GI Bill and the military does. So that's the first thing I want to do, is build up our police force. And across the board, I want to see our police stronger in number, stronger in force, stronger in education. I want to see resource officers put into schools. I want to see a successful police force and a safe city. And when people look back at my term, I want them to think that, they feel like they've been made safer over the course of those couple of years. Infrastructure is huge. I want people to feel like we have been responsive. Now, with all the problems Jackson has in infrastructure, we can't respond to every single one immediately. But I want to feel like people are actually getting their phone calls returned, and even if it's not the day of or the next day, it's within 2 or 3 days that we actually have a response when you call about a leaky fire hydrant or a pothole. I want to see a safe city and a responsive team on our infrastructure. And that's what I want to be remembered for.
Thank you, Emil. I wish you'd spoken up a little louder, Charles, and reminded me that I've already screwed up for the night. Omitted allowing y'all to do your opening statements. We went right to the questions. And I apologize for that. So what we're going to do, we're going to continue with this question, and I'll let you do your opening statements. I realize this one question kind of led to that anyway, but I'm sorry. So we'll finish with this round of questions, and I'll let you do your opening statements. My apologies. Mr. Foote.
Yes, sir. I hope to look back on in early 2017 at the end of the 2 years left in this term. Our campaign theme is Make Jackson Strong. And obviously, one of the, what I like to look back and see is that Jackson's stronger in 2017 than it is right now. We have some troubling trends in the city. One is declining property tax revenue, and others declining sales tax revenue, even while our expenses are going up. So we have a divergence there that we need to be proactive in addressing. And that's one of the primary things I'm going to focus on, first by looking at the budgets and the finance of the city, and taking action and making recommendations to the rest of the city council and to the mayor on ways we can strengthen Jackson and make it more pro-business, business-friendly, and attract the kind of revenue and business to the downtown area that we can make that turn and make Jackson a stronger city.
Thank you, Mr. Sellers.
Well, in 2017, I would love to look back and say that I've built some really good relationships with our community, not only our voters, but everyone in the city of Jackson, because we can't just look at it from a Ward 1 perspective. We've got to look at building our entire city. Our ward has been very successful in creating a large portion of the tax base, but we've got to see what benefits the entire city. And some of those things that we've really got to work on, Emil touched on crime. We've got to do a better job in supporting our police chief. I think Lee Vance is going to come in and do a great job, and I want to build a relationship there. We've got to do a really good job in supporting Jackson Public Schools and helping them improve those graduation rates. And I want to build a good relationship with the council, because this is not going to be a position I'm going to step down from in just a couple of years if elected. This is not a stepping stone for me. It's a call to service for me. And that's what I'd like to see, is building relationships that can move forward.
Thank you, Richard. Charles, Ms. Barber.
I'd like to work with our mayor. I think he's got a lot of great intentions. I think he wants to serve the people. But if any of you have ever called City Hall, called any city department, you realize that the mayor's culture of service has not filtered down. I want to work with our mayor to encourage our department heads. I don't want to say the word train. You know, if you're 40 years old and you don't care to do your job, there's nothing that can be done that you except to replace you. I want to work with our mayor so that the public does not have to call Howard Ballou to get the city to return a phone call. We've all seen Howard Ballou go out to some house on West Capitol. It's been on the list for 2 years. Howard Ballou goes out there, embarrasses the city. Within 48 hours, his bulldozer's there. Why does that have to happen? Why does the city have to be embarrassed to do its job? I want to be able to come back in 2 years and say that we are getting closer and closer to breaking ground on the McGowan Lake project. 15 years ago, when you elected me to be your supervisor, one of the first acts I did, I was fortunate enough to work with 5 fellow supervisors to fund the first study of that project. This project can be the biggest public works, biggest economic development, biggest flood control project in the Mid-South for years to come. I want to work on that. I want to upgrade the city's credit rating. That is not going to be easy. I've done it before. It is not going to be easy. I will say that twice. So that when the city goes to start getting ready to pay for the water and sewer repairs and replacements that are going to have to be made over the next 20 years, we can do it at a more favorable interest rate. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Nobody else has asked for time on that issue. That's all on that question. I apologize to the crowd. I apologize to the candidates. We'll now let you have your opening statements. Bill? By the way, I did tell the candidates they could sit and talk, they can stand and talk. If any of them want to stand up and talk while they're talking, they're welcome to do that. So just so you won't think they're doing it on their own. So, Bill?
My name is Emil Wilson, and I'm excited to be here because for the first time in my life, I actually feel like we have a mayor and a momentum at City Hall that may not always make the right decisions, but they're actually making decisions. They may not always do the right thing, but they actually want to do the right thing. And it's exciting to actually see that for the first time, really in my life. We've been talking about a safe city and a smart budget. That's been the entire thing for the campaign. Safe city, smart budget. So we're wanting to go through, find ways to strengthen our police, and find ways to look at our budget proactively. Where is money being wasted? Things like what I said earlier about our police and the drop-off rate, the resignation rate of police. Things like our jail, where we spend an astronomical amount every year driving prisoners in our jail back and forth. For what we spend, a couple of engineering firms ran a study, and for what we spend transporting prisoners every year, we could build and maintain our own city jail. That is stunning. That's the sort of logic that we need to be looking at to make this city strong. We need a tough budget. We need a strong sense of care and concern. We need a responsive police force and a responsive mayoral team. It's the executives, the guys who respond when we call 311. I have great experience working with projects, overseeing contracts, and working with difficult people. A lot of my clients are in Hollywood, and I'm a Republican. I think that says a lot right there. I grew up in Jackson. I started out at Murrah High School, where even there, I was elected student body vice president. And, for years, I've invested time not only in Northeast Jackson, but in relationships across the entire ward. That's really important, across the entire city, because that's what we're going to have to work with. If we do not want to be shut out, we need someone who has the guts to stand up and say something is wrong when it is wrong, to call out a budget when it's a bad budget, to call out a contract when it's a bad contract. But we also need someone who understands how to communicate to the rest of the city council. And that's important, because for right now, to keep their stamps had a great opportunity to expand tax credits into Ward 7, and he did, because Margaret Barrett laid out exactly how it would benefit the entire city. And that's what I want to do. Systematically go through Ward 1, explain our needs, and how our needs being fulfilled actually help the entire city prosper. I can do that. I've made a career out of doing that sort of thing in very difficult situations. And I'm looking forward to doing that sort of thing for the city of Jackson.
Thank you, Neil. And that was 3 minutes, Mr. Didn't start the timer like I did. All right, Matt, we're going to start the timer on 3 minutes on these. Richard.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to the Hinds County Republicans for hosting this debate tonight. My name is Richard Sellers. My wife and I, Amanda, live in the Heatherton neighborhood just up Ridgewood Road here in Northeast Jackson, and we're excited about serving the city of Jackson. I am a special education teacher and serve in that capacity, trying to work with students every day to make sure they graduate high school and have opportunities to be successful in the future. I also serve as an officer candidate in the Army National Guard. My wife Amanda serves at UMC as a physician at their hospital. And we're excited to see the growth that could take place in Jackson with a mayor who wants to see the city thrive, with a council that doesn't have personalities that it's had in the past, who have a common goal of wanting to see Jackson be successful. And I'd love to win your support and help be a part of that change for Jackson to be successful. I grew up in South Mississippi in Picayune. My wife and I both came to Jackson for college. She's a Millsaps graduate, and I went to MC. We moved away for a few years for Amanda to go to medical school at Virginia Tech, and we knew we wanted to come back to Jackson, and this is where we wanted to start our family and start our careers. And so we love Northeast Jackson. We want to see it be successful, and that's why I'm running, is to try to help be part of the continued movement towards change for the city to grow. You'll hear me talk a lot tonight about revitalizing our streets and reviving our schools. We've got to fix the crime problems in Jackson. I think there are a couple ways we can address that. We've got a good police chief now in Lee Vance. I think he's going to do a really good job in ending some of the problems we've had within JPD. But I think the main way that we can affect crime long-term and look at improving the city as a whole is improving Jackson Public Schools. And if we graduate at a much higher rate than we're doing right now, students that are able to go out, get good jobs, and provide for their families, we're not going to see the crime problems. But when we're having 35% dropout rates in JPS, it's going to be impossible to provide for those families without, fixing the problems within JPS. Because at best, those families that we're failing, we're going to support through the entitlement system, and at worst, we're going to support in the prison system. I'd love to win your support. I am very much the underdog here. I said that in the last debate. As you'll see, I don't have the business resume that some of my fellow candidates have, but I have a passion to serve Jackson. I'd love your support.
Thank you, Richard. Charles.
I'm Charles Barber, and I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. It's a cold night. I really want to thank the Bellwether Church, Pastor John Tate. I see Deacon Boyd Killen here tonight, all the staff that's making this happen. I want to thank the County Republican Party. I see a lot of members of the Hinds County Republican Women. Thank you for being here. My wife is here. She's a 15-year member of the Hinds County Republican Women. I want my son to stand up for 1 second. The last debate, he was working at McDade's. He's here tonight. This is Alan. Alan got his Eagle Scout Monday night. I'm very proud of him. And yeah, thank you. He earned it, and I'm awful proud of him. And his sister, Camille, can't be with us tonight. She's sick, but she's an engineer at the Nissan plant. And my wife has worked so hard with her to give her a great education and ready to do that. And I'm awful proud of both of them. 15 years ago, you elected me to be your county supervisor. I served for 8 years. And I served on a tough board. Some people might call it hostile. I don't think it is. It was not easy. I worked with on a Democrat-controlled board. I was able to work with my fellow supervisors to have 8 consecutive budget surpluses. Maybe not much, but a surplus of $1 is still a surplus of $1. You live within your budget. We were able to do it. It was not easy. 8 years in a row, I was able to help increase Sheriff McMillan's budget. Every year he got more money than the year before. 8 years as a supervisor, we made significant road improvements in the rural area. Once I even paved Meadowbrook Road with county asphalt, county equipment, and county men. 2 times while I was your supervisor, Standard & Poor's looked at the county's finances. Twice, Standard & Poor's upgraded the county's credit and bond rating. Twice. It's very difficult to do. Unfortunately, since I'm no longer your supervisor, the bond rating and credit rating has dropped. I was on a Democrat board. I did work with my fellow supervisors. They elected me to be the president of the board. I look forward to working with the city council. There are 6 Democrats down there. I'm not going to make it a Republican council. I hope to work with 3 or more of the members to steer it slightly back to the center. I think it can be done. I know there's a lot of people on the board of the city council that are smart and everybody wants roads paved. I want to try to work with them on the budget. The things I want to focus on are the adequate funding of the JPD, preparing the city's finances for the shock of the credit rating, of the bond for the water and sewer, and finding more money to maintain our roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Ashby.
Thank you. My name is Ashby Foote, and I'm running for the Ward 1 City Council. Some background, I graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point in 1974, served 5.5 years with the field artillery, and came back to Jackson to pursue a career in the investment arena in 1980. Still in the investment business. I started my own firm in 1988 as an investment advisor, and founder, and continue to be the president of that firm. Along the way on the nonprofit side, I have enjoyed several different opportunities to serve the community and the state. Governor Fordyce appointed me to the board of the Mississippi Development Bank and Mississippi Business Finance Corporation in the mid-90s. And I also joined the board of Innovate Mississippi, which at the time was the Mississippi Technology Alliance, and ITD, the Institute for Technology Development. I continue to serve on ITD board at Innovate Mississippi, and we also started recently a board, ITD started the Bigger Pie Forum, which is a nonprofit focused on growing the Mississippi economy at a faster pace. So I spent a lot of time working on the economy and the finance over the past 30 years, and you learn a lot in the investment business. You have to learn how to dig into a financial statement, find out the facts. You have to figure out what questions to ask, and where to look, and how to read between the lines. And I think there's a lot of help that I can bring to the city council with that expertise. And that's my goal, that's why I'm running. I think we've got a lot of challenges on the infrastructure side, on the crime and safety side, on the school side. And when you look at all those issues, it really comes back down to what can we afford? How can we afford the solutions to the problems we face? And I think it really rests in many regards at the budget level, and that's where my expertise is, and why I decided to enter this race and run for the city council. Appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Ashby. Now that we have talked about will be the only Republican on the city council joining 6 Democrats. In order to get any of your prior issues actually accomplished, you will obviously have to put together a coalition with other members of the council. Which of the other members of the current council do you have a personal relationship with? And which of the other council members do you feel you could work with to forge a working coalition?
I would be the only Republican on the council. And it's, would be no surprise to anyone that it would be difficult to put issues forward and get them passed. I think one of the strongest things I have going for me and my campaign is that I'm able to build relationships. In my everyday job as a special education teacher, I work with 50 different teachers at our high school, talking with parents every day, working with administrators, county office officials, and we all come from different backgrounds and different perspectives, but we usually have one goal in common, and that's student success. And I think I can bridge that into working with other council members. We may have differing views, but I think I can build relationships to where we know when we're coming together and working on ideas, we're doing it for the common good of the city. I have a personal relationship with Mr. Stamps and Mr. Hendricks. They're both guys that I feel like I could work with. There are others that I would like to build strong relationships with, and I think I could do that and come up with at least 3 members that we could come together and get issues passed.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. All right, Charles.
As I mentioned earlier, this would not be my first time to be the only conservative Republican on a Democratic organization in this county. I look forward to working with everybody on the city council. Everybody wants to get roads paved. Everybody wants to have the phone answered when you dial 911. I want to work with my fellow councilmen to prioritize the budget. If you look at the city budget, it's 400 or 500 pages long. I want to work with some of my fellow council members, at least 3 to get a majority, to prioritize things. To illustrate this point, and this is really sad in a way, the city in 2013 spent $24,000 more on pest control than it did on asphalt. $296,000 was spent to purchase asphalt, $320,000 on pest control services. Is that what your priority is? Nobody wants rats running around City Hall. But if you really think we should spend more money on pest control than road resurfacing in this city, I think that's a point that everybody understands. I was elected to be the president of the Harris County Board of Supervisors. Why they elected me, you'll have to ask them. I think because I showed up on time and brought the donuts. I don't know if that'll happen again. They think they bring their own donuts. But I look forward to working with Democrats. I've always been successful. I would mention that I went to Washington, D.C. I was with Democrats. We went to see Senator Cochran. We worked together, Democrats and Republicans. We brought back a check for $25 million for road work in Hinds County. I look forward to working with Democrats and using my Republican credentials to work in the State House and in Washington to serve the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Bill.
The city council is an increasingly younger board right now. It's a younger board that has a lot of energy. Tyrone Hendricks, Melvin Priestley, Keither Stamps, these are young guys with energy to make a difference in the city, and that's what they want to see working with them, is energy to make a difference. And the great thing is I've grown up in this city. I may look young, but I like to remind people that I'm older than Tate Reeves was when we elected him treasurer. But I've grown up here in Jackson, and I've often been the minority in the groups. I was a Protestant going to a Jewish school, and then I was white conservative going to Murrah High School, which at the time was 87% black. And I was a conservative going to school at Georgetown. I did a certificate in economics, and that's not very well known as a conservative place. I have a history of working across the aisle to get things accomplished, and particularly with these members of the council. Who do I have a relationship with? Well, Margaret Barrett, my gosh, she chased me off her lawn when I was a kid growing up, playing just down the street from her. Melvin Priester, my mother was a teacher. My mother taught the Priester boys when they were still growing up. Those have been family friends for a long time. DeKeither Stamps, I know well and call him a friend. Tyrone was a political consultant, still is. He and I have known each other for a long time, even though we sit opposite ends of the aisle. We get together, we share war stories. You know, they respect me. Ms. Stokes is getting ready to leave. But in the end, you've got a good team that actually want to succeed. They want to see Jackson grow. They want to see Jackson prosper. They just need a little guidance and help. And that's what I'm excited to be able to do. To be able to talk to Melvin Priester, talk to DeKeither, to lay out exactly what they need to see in order to get things done.
Thank you.
I've met some of the city council members, some I have not yet met, but I look forward to working with them. I have no qualms with my ability to get along with them. My 5 years in active duty in the Army and 6 years with the Army Reserves, I rarely served in a unit where I was in the majority. We typically had 20 to 30% Hispanic, 30 to 40% Caucasian, and another 30 to 40% African American. And we all worked together to accomplish the mission that was set before us. Now, the military is a lot different from the city council, but it was a great opportunity to stretch my horizons and learn a lot about working with people from dramatically different backgrounds, whether it's ethnic or culture or educational or whatever. And I look forward to working with them. I have no problem that we'll be able to put together coalitions of the people who really want to see Jackson thrive.
Thank you, Ashby. Richard?
I think one thing I failed to mention, and I think it separates myself a little bit from some of our other Republican candidates. The council is moving towards, and Councilman Stamps has said it and will continue to say it, it's moving towards being a full-time position. The votes are there on the council already, and I'm going to devote myself to this being my full-time job. Being able to go out and build those relationships. I'm going to step away from teaching if elected, and I'm going to take council on 50 to 60 hours a week, whatever it needs to take. And I don't know that all of the other candidates are going to be able to do that and build those relationships. So that, I think, is one thing that separates myself a little bit.
Thank you. Anyone else? Next question. Barbara. When allocating resources, some suggest initiatives should be split evenly 7 ways for each ward. Assuming the needs of the city are not in reality split into these political subdivisions, this means some wards benefit despite greater needs in other wards. As a councilman, if faced with the choice between what is better to address Jackson's needs or what benefits Ward 1, how will you make your decision?
I would ask you to repeat that. I've already used my hearing loss.
I would.
Artillery.
Let me get the last question. Let me get the last sentence because I saw 2 other people ask for it. Stop. As a councilman, if faced with a choice between what is better to address Jackson's needs or what benefits Ward 1, how will you make your decision?
You have to do what's best for the whole city. You never cut your own ward's throat to do it. In other words, if there's going to be some asphalt that's going to be laid, you want to make sure that your ward gets its fair share. But if there's a tremendous need in West Jackson for something, you need to make sure it's taken care of. The city is no better than the city as a whole. And let me give you a little example. When I was your supervisor, I addressed an issue very similar to this. The Levelwood's baseball program in southwest Jackson was having lots of problems. I bumped into some guys from Raymond, Mississippi, a great little town down there, and they were talking about they were going to upgrade their baseball field. They had one baseball field in Raymond, and I did a little bit of work. I found somebody that needed something from the county. We made a deal, and the state of Mississippi put up $1.2 million for a 3 baseball diamond baseball complex in Raymond. I had no responsibility to do that. It was not my supervisor district, but I did it. It was the right thing to do for the county. When I worked for Leland Speed, he once talked about people can live wherever they want to live, quality of life. And I think that if you do things that help one part of the city, it's good for everything. Obviously, we want to make sure that the roads in Ward 1 are well maintained. They're not currently well maintained. Obviously, we want to make sure that the businesses and the homes are protected by the police here. I think the police are doing a better job than they have in the past. But yes, you want to help the whole city, and sometimes you have to put something on the back burner slightly in your own area to make that happen.
Thank you, Charles. Emil?
I've often said on this campaign that a lot of the education problems in West Jackson are the crime problems in North Jackson. Anything that impacts one area, when we are this tight, this close, there aren't geographic boundaries, even between Jackson and Ridgeland. You look at the crime that was hitting the country club. If you remember those home burglaries that were happening right around the Jackson Country Club, that was even Ridgeland apartments, where that crime was coming from. This is not about just pouring money into one ward. It's pouring money into the problems, because the problems of Ward 2, the problems of Ward 1 through 7, they all affect one another. So I'm excited at the opportunity to be able to make an impact, not only in Ward 1, but in other areas in the city. And I think to work together with some of the suburbs as well, because that's where a lot of our businesses are going. That's where a lot of our crime is coming from. We need to find solutions that build Jackson up, because if Jackson is strong, then Northeast Jackson is going to be strong.
Thank you, Bill. Ashley?
The interesting question, Pete, talking about dividing up resources and how to divide them up. My focus is not going to be so much on dividing the resources, but trying to grow the pie, make the pie bigger. Something I've focused on a lot over the past 20 years, trying to figure out how to make the economy grow so that more resources are available for everybody. I really think that's how we get out of this situation we've got having Jackson now with the falling sales tax revenue and property tax revenue. So my focus is going to be on growing the pie, not on figuring out how to divide it up.
Thank you, Ashley. Richard?
Well, I definitely would be the advocate for Northeast Jackson, for Ward 1, in trying to make sure that problems were solved within our ward. But more so, I want to be an advocate for Jackson and see Jackson thrive, because Jackson's success is going to be my #1 priority. We've got to have a strong capital city for the state of Mississippi, and through that, we've got to do a lot of things that impact other areas besides Northeast Jackson. I'll talk on and on about the schools being a huge priority for me. Don't get me wrong, I'm not naive. The city council is not the school board. You don't make day-to-day decisions as the Jackson Public School Board would, but you can be an advocate coming from your community, working with the superintendent, working with Dr. Gray, and trying to get things passed that will help the schools be successful. We've got to improve the schools so that our middle-class families can stay in Jackson and thrive. They're moving now, and we're losing that tax base to Madison and Flowood and Clinton because we're not doing a good job in providing them a way for their kids to get a good education. And, Northeast Jackson, the majority of our families, that are here, send our kids to Jackson Pratt and Jackson Academy. And those are great schools, and they're a credit to our community. But if you send your kids there and you think JPS isn't your problem, you're wrong, because for our city to be successful, Jackson Public Schools has to be successful. So if we can build on their success, we can grow our tax base and have more resources to be able to provide in different areas across the city, not just in Northeast Jackson.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ask. All four of you tend to identify the same general problems as being the major issues facing the city: crime, infrastructure, education, economic development. Everyone recognizes that the city does not have the money to resolve all these problems. Please give us specific ways in how you can reduce current spending significantly in some areas, enough to address these other areas.
Specific examples on how to reduce spending. Let me use a specific example that I referred to at our last forum that, as an example, not so much in reducing spending, but in optimizing, rationalizing, and right-sizing Jackson's government. The parking meters. We talked about parking meters before. Jackson right now has budgeted expected revenues for next year in parking meters of $150,000. The expected revenue from parking meters in the city of Oxford, Mississippi is $500,000. I called the city Public Works Department to get some more information on the parking meters last week. And I got the gentleman, after a couple of tries, got the gentleman on the phone that oversees the parking meter area. And I asked him how many parking meters Jackson had. And his response was, if you want to know that, you'll have to submit an open records request. So I asked him a couple more questions about the parking meters, and he said to each one, you'll have to submit an open records request. That is not the response of a strong city. That is the response of a weak city. An attitude of using red tape to try to obscure the data from citizens. And I've identified myself as a candidate for Ward 1. Now, I don't know if when you get elected to city council, if you continue to have to submit open records requests to get the information, basic information like that. But I'm willing to do that. And I did submit the open records request. I haven't got the information back from them. But it speaks volumes about the challenges we faced in streamlining the government and reducing the red tape so that not only we become more business friendly when it comes to permitting or licensing, but we also become more efficient in our government. I did find out that we have 1,200 parking meters. Oxford has 288, so they have 1/4 the parking meters we do, and they're going to get 3 times the expected revenue. So we got some real problems, and there's not a shortage of tax money coming into Jackson, but I don't think we're doing an efficient job of either delivering the services or getting our money's worth from our taxpayers.
Thank you. See no request? Okay. Charles?
I mentioned earlier the city is spending $250,000 on bug spray, $296,000 on asphalt. It begs a lot of questions. The city has a budget of $12 million for human and cultural services. I'm not sure where all that money's spent on. Like Mr. Foote, I was told I would have to submit something in writing to find out where that money was being spent. I think some of it goes to support the planetarium and the auditorium, but not $12 million. That money could go somewhere else. We've got a project coming into the Eastover area, it's actually in Ward 7. It's going to produce a lot of taxes, a lot of sales tax. I think that project will probably end up being bigger than the mall in Pearl. About a lot of money for the city. Things like that. We do want to make it a bigger pie, but you have to watch where you spend, where you spend it. Just because you had $12 million in the Division of Human and Cultural Services last year does not mean you need it there this year. Thank you.
Emil?
One of the places you could go to look and see just where our budget problems are is the city's CAFR report, the audit. And on a recent trip, I was on a plane for a very long time, and I sat and read the whole thing, and it only put me to sleep about 12 times. It's a massive document, but you gotta get through it because it's so painful to see where the waste is. And you know, Charles mentions the planetarium and a lot of human and cultural services. One of the reasons that the budget difference between what they bring in and what they cost is so high is public safety. People aren't going to the planetarium, they aren't spending money downtown, they aren't going and engaging because they don't feel safe. One of the things that we need to do is start going through, and I like what Mr. Foote said about efficiency. A 2009 study was done that said if you just removed redundancy in the police department, lowering our civilian force to the southeastern average, you would save enough money to hire up to 550 new officers and give everybody on the staff a raise. That is a ridiculous waste, and there is waste in every part of the city budget. I want to go through with a fine-tooth comb. I want to see where that waste is, and then I want to start allocating it to public works and to public safety. Because if you fix public works and fix public safety, revenues are going to go up.
Thank you, Neil. Richard?
One of the areas we spend the most money on as a city, and the product is not reflective of the money being spent, is within Jackson Public Schools. I want to support Jackson Public Schools. You'll hear me talk about that a lot, but I don't mean that I want to give them more money. They have got to figure out a way to work with the budget that we're able to provide in a fiscally responsible manner from the city to be able to support the programs they need. We spend more money per capita per student than just about anywhere in the state, but we're only graduating 65% of our students, and that's got to change. And so I don't claim to be an expert on every aspect of the budget. That's one thing that I would dive into if elected, and with, as Emil said, with a fine-tooth comb, find those areas that need to be reduced and work with my other council members to figure out where we're wasting money and how to fix that.
Thank you, Richard. Charles?
As one of the old candidates, I've already started forgetting things. The Ag Museum was saved last week by the Jackson Fire Department, and I want to congratulate the firefighters of the Jackson Fire Department for what they did. They saved the state a fortune. The state doesn't pay for that fire service. I think they should start thinking hard about it. University Medical Center pays a fee to the city for fire protection. The other hospitals don't. Jackson State doesn't. When I was at Ole Miss had a fire department. Ole Miss no longer has a fire department. They save money, the city covers it now. The city gets a fee from Ole Miss. Hattiesburg receives a fire fee from Southern Miss. I think the state should be paying some fee. I don't know what the amount should be. They should start paying for fire services so that we could have more money to put into things that the city council and the mayor find appropriate.
Thank you, Charles. Emil?
I definitely want to second what Mr. Sellers was saying about education, particularly note the high administrative costs that JPS has. Now, as a city councilman, you don't have a lot of say over what the school system says and does, but you sure have a say over an up or down vote on their budget, an up or down vote on school board members, and you can call people and find out why we're spending that kind of money on administration costs and not on the classroom. And that's been a problem in our entire city government, is people aren't willing to pick up the phone and make those kinds of calls. The mention of the Ag Museum. It's true, the state used to pay for all of these services, and they stopped because of bad relations with the city. And this is my little pitch right now on behalf of all four of us. If you ever wondered why it was important to have a Republican on that council, This is the answer. You need someone who's going to be in the room with people like Senator Sally Doty, Governor Phil Bryant, Tate Reeves, Lieutenant Governor. You need people who have those relationships, pick up the phone and ask for this. And that's why it's so important that a Republican hold on to this seat.
Thank you, Bill. No other questions? All right, we're through the first round of questions, and we are running on schedule. Actually done very good. I'm gonna give everybody a 2-minute break. Y'all can stand up in the audience if you want to. Y'all can take a break. You're gonna take a 2-minute break. Quick correction to make, and we'll get